So today for the final talk, I'm going to be talking about formation of the heart. And so the topic really is formation. And it's something that it's kind of lost as a tool in leadership today. And we'll kind of talk about why people have forgotten about it and how it can be used in the leader's toolbox. So I want to talk about why formation. Before we even talk about what it is, I want to talk about why it is. All right, so what is the best way to solve a problem? So now let's think about this. It's a very general question. What's the best way to solve a problem? And you're not going to like my answer. My answer is the best way to solve a problem is not to have a problem in the first place, right? That's the best way to solve a problem. Or as my computer science professor, Dale Hanchy, liked to say, never solve a problem you can eliminate. All right? So this is, in computer programming, we always run into all sorts of weird problems, but the best thing is just to program in such a way that you don't run into problems in the first place. All right? Now, the root cause of our problems is us, right? That theologically, your root problem of it's us. We are sinful people. We live in a sinful world. We live among sinful people. The root cause of our problems is people who need a changed heart, all right? And so, by extension, if you do manage to change the heart, you eliminate the problem. There's not, if we were all perfect beings with perfect hearts, we would live in perfect harmony and we would not have these problems. So I hope you can see where I'm going. If we actually intentionally work on our hearts and on the hearts of the people that we work with on a daily basis, we can actually eliminate a lot of problems before they even happen. All right, now, there's a common saying, as the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Right? What's the second best time to plant a tree? Right now, today. All right? We don't have right hearts today. There's all sorts of things we can wish we would have done in the past to make our hearts more right today. And we can wish all we want, but the fact is we're here today, and so the best time to get our hearts right was 20 years ago, and the second best time to get our hearts right is today. So the question is, how do we plant, water, and grow the tree of right hearts? Okay? So, I want to look at the Bible real quick and look at what the Bible says about the benefits of shaping our hearts. So this goes all the way back to the Old Testament. Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, that sounds important. Above all else, guard your heart. Why do we guard our hearts? Because how much of what we do? Everything we do. Everything we do flows from it. Okay, so above all else, guard your hearts because everything you do flows from it. All right. In the New Testament, Paul says to the Romans, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by what? The renewing of your mind." Right? You're going to have a transformed mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. So having a renewed mind, I will say the actual relationship between mind and heart is not something that I'm especially clear on, but having a renewed mind and heart doesn't just change everything you do, it helps you discern what the will of God is, right? Who here needs help discerning what the will of God is, right? So if we were able to do better things because we have better hearts and discern what the will of God is, that will take us a long way forward, right? So then what does Jesus say? Jesus says, "For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil that is stored up in him." All right, so if you fill your heart with good things, you're going to bring good things out. And that's just going to happen naturally. Okay? So these are really important things to think about. So, whose heart needs to be changed? Well, first of all, our hearts need to be changed. All right? We have to say we have not done everything that we need for our hearts, and so we need to do more. So having a better heart will align us better for leading our groups in peace, courage, and wisdom. Okay, so if your heart is better, you will be a better leader. Okay? If our families are growing as disciples of Christ, that helps us be examples for others on how to do this. If your training of your children into the heart of God will help show other people how they can be training their children into the heart of God. And then as groups, having a shared heart and a shared vision will help us stay united, thriving, and at peace within our communities. So if not only do we have hearts of goodness, but we have a shared heart, we have a shared vision. This is one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of disagreements that happen over differences in vision. And so if you can align yourselves and help people see the vision for your group in the same way that you do, that can align yourself so that the problems don't happen in the first place. You have alignment, so everybody's on the same page. And the problems are smaller, and there's fewer of them. So that's what we're aiming for. We want changed hearts. We need them for ourselves. We need them for our families. We need them for other people. All right? So how do we do this? All right, so that is what formation is. It's how you do this. All right, so I'm going to do a quiz. Now, before I do this, I do want to say this whole concept of formation, it's also new for me. Okay, so haven't been a lifetime developer of formation, haven't been a lifetime practicer of formation. So this is new to me too. So I just want you to realize as we go through this. What's your favorite movie? While you were sleeping. Others? Sound of Music. All right. Others? Die Hard. That's mine. Anything else? All right. So here's what I want to know. Who do you relate to in that movie? Funny story. My cousin, his last name is McLean. And he named his son John, and his wife didn't put two and two together till he was 10 years old. So, all right, so what song resonates with you the most? What's a song that's just like, this is just an amazing song? How Firm a Foundation? That's an excellent one. So the song I like, has anyone heard The Middle by Jimmy Eats World? It's a great song. I'd sing it for you, but then you'd all walk out. So we'll let Donna be in charge of the singing. So one thing with songs is you think about how do the images and feelings of the song match your daily experience. Okay. So think about your favorite song and think about how that song makes you feel, what it makes you think about. Okay. So now what I want you to ask yourself is, what things do you do regularly that if you failed to do them, your day or your week would seem incomplete? Okay, what are things that you would just be like, it wasn't a day because I didn't do this? All right.
Fed the animals.
Fed the animals, yes. Yeah. What? Reading. All right. Good time with a book. Yeah. My wife and I sit down and watch about 20 minutes of TV at the end of every day. It just would not seem like a day. And we play Wordle. It's also would not be a day without Wordle. So I want to just comment a little bit on this. So my point is not to stand in judgment over you for your favorite things. I'll tell the good and bad things about my favorite things. So Die Hard, I'll tell you why I like Die Hard. Die Hard is a great movie because there's a guy, and he's not a great guy. The John McClane is not the world's greatest man. He's got lots of problems, but when push comes to shove, he does what he has to do in the right situation, right? He's put between a rock and a hard place. He does what he needs to do for the people he loves in the time that they need it most, right? And what you have to do is you have to ask yourself, what are the images that you have in your mind about what reality looks like? What are these stories? What do they do to you as a person? Okay, because if you're living with the wrong stories, with the wrong messages, they can change the way that you put together the story of what's happening in your life. Okay, there's bad things that you can pull out from Die Hard as well, but there's a insane amount of cockiness and whatnot. But nonetheless, what you should be asking yourselves all the time is, think about the things that you enjoy and the things that you think about, and ask yourself, what kind of a person is thinking about those things and doing those things making you into? So formation, a simple definition, is just the process of building a person's heart. Okay? So I could tell you to be a great person, but that doesn't make you a great person. You can tell yourself, I'm going to be a great person, but that doesn't make you a great person. You have to do the things, right? So your heart, as we saw in those Bible verses, your heart is what guides all these things. And so formation is, how do you build your heart? What is the process of building your heart? So again, results of formation. What storylines do we love and are familiar with? That is a result of formation. What stories go on in your mind? What do you tell yourself? What kinds of storylines go on in your mind? How do you interpret the world through those storylines? So if something happens to you, if somebody cuts you off in traffic, is that the start of a revenge story? Or is that an angel intervention story for something you don't even see? Right? These are two different stories you can tell yourself about the exact same situation. Okay? And so we have to be careful about what types of stories that we tell ourselves and think about, because they will affect the way that we view all the things that happen all around us. And then we have to ask ourselves, how do we view our participation in these stories? Every story, they've got a good guy, they've got a bad guy, they've got bystanders. Who are you in the stories that you tell yourself? And so you have to think about, because that's who you're ultimately going to live into. Is you have these stories, you tell yourself, then you say, okay, well, who am I relating to in this story? And that's probably when situations arise, you're going to read that story into what's happening. And you're going to live out that story that you've told yourself. And then this even applies to wider contexts. What is the story that we see when we look at our city? What is the story that we see when we look at our church? What is the story that we see when we look at our groups? If our group is having a tough time, is that the story of a group that's failing and is just going to wither off, or is that the story of a group that's under hard times and regrouping itself to make a comeback? What story are you living in? What context are you looking at all these things that are happening around you? And then there's habits of thought. What habits of thought do you find automatic? What just comes out of you? That's what the Proverbs are saying, is that, this is, and actually also what Jesus was saying is like, good things come out of a good heart. So when something happens to you, what is your automatic response? Is that the right automatic response? Right? So these are things that result from formation, right? So what habits of thoughts and what habits of action? What is our default to do? And what is our automatic response to situations? Do we panic? Do we hunker down? Do we go off by ourselves? What are the things that we habitually do? So this is kind of the output of formation. Is kind of the answer to these questions. So what causes these things, right? Well, everybody is always being formed. Okay, this is the thing. We can say we want to be a good person, but that doesn't make us a good person. We have to form into a good person. So everyone is always being formed. Every time you make a decision, it makes it easier to make that kind of decision in the future. Okay, so if I sometimes struggle with eating too much. If I eat too much one day, it makes it really easy to eat too much the next day, right? So the decisions that you make affect how easy it is to make the right decision the next day. Every thought that you think means that you're making that thought more prevalent in your mind and making it easier to have those kinds of thoughts in the future. Every movie you watch makes it easier to view your current situation within that storyline, and every song you listen to makes it easier to recreate that feeling, attitude, or storyline that's present in that song. Okay? So this is what I call the formation loop. All right? There's who we are and what we do. And who you are influences what you actually wind up doing. But simultaneously, what you do shapes the person you are. Okay? So now that isn't to say that we're stuck, but it's to say it's the default. If you want to change who you are, you've got to interrupt this loop. The loop's going to happen. Who you are is going to influence what you do, and what you do will shape who you are. So if you want to make a change, you've got to find a spot in there and move it. You've got to change what if you change what you do, that will shape who you are and make it easier to do correctly the next time. Right? And so there's also other things that you can do that shape who you are. And so you just have to be cognizant of the fact that all the things that you do are shaping who you are. So you will be formed, intentionally or unintentionally. So everything that you put in will come out. So every time you make a decision, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to deepen existing patterns that you already exhibit. So you're going to get more of the same, or you're going to create a new pattern for you to follow. Okay? So that's pretty much every decision will do one of those two things. And so you can either let the world dictate your formation, or you can decide what direction you'll be formed in. Okay? So this is about making intentional choices of what you do, what you practice, your habits, and recognize that you are continually being formed and asking yourself, what sort of things do I want to do to form myself in the correct way? All right? So being intentional about the process formation involves recognizing who we are today, recognizing who we want to become, and making decisions based on who we want to become. But there's another part. So not only do we make decisions according to who we want to become, this is the important part. We want to proactively organize your environment to make your heart and mind align with what you want to be. All right, so you've got to organize your environment. So this is where, if you think about in church, do this in remembrance of me. Right? We're changing our environment to change what we think about. That changes who we are. Right? And think about like all the things that God told the Israelites. He's like, make these stones, and then when your kids ask, what do these stones mean? You can tell them the story. Right? So giving yourself opportunities to organize our environment so that we can think about the stories that put our heart in the right frame. Right? So we definitely need to make the decisions every day to put ourselves in a better place, but we can also organize our environment to make ourselves, our hearts and minds, align more easily with who we'd like to be. Now, we're in the information age. I'm an information guy. That's what I do all day. I make bits and bytes go here and there. I make sure that, it reproduces reliably on one end what you put in the other. I organize content, all sorts of things like that. That's the information age. And so what we've done, the thing about information is it's a lot easier to systematize information than it is formation. Okay? I can tell my computer to automate information. I can't tell my computer to make me a better person. All right? And so what we've done, you've ever heard the story about the guy who's missing it's dark, and he's looking for his contact under a street light, and someone's like, so is this where you dropped it? He's like, no, I dropped it over there, but the light's better over here, right? And so this is kind of what we've done with information and formation, is that, formation is hard work. So we've opted instead just to make everything about information. Okay? So I like to divide the world into 3 types of content. Informational, that tells you something you didn't know. Transformational, changes your direction or gives you a new perspective. But formational directs who you become. All right? And so basically everything on the internet is informational. It's telling you, maybe slightly transformational, because it can give you a new perspective. But basically, what's happening? How does something work? Who said what when? What's a new idea I can think about? But information has limits in how it can solve problems. If you think about it, I can't remember if I have a slide on this or not, but anyone done those HR training videos? They're really terrible. We had one at our company on sexual harassment, right? I cannot imagine any person on the earth who was sexually harassing someone who watched one of those videos and like, oh my gosh, now I shouldn't, right? That is the quintessential nature of replacing formation with information, right? You know what's the thing about actually stopping sexual harassment in the workplace? It takes work. You know what doesn't take work? Putting in an informational video, right? And that's kind of what we've done with everything. We're like, okay, well, we'll just give you the information and let you do whatever you want with it, all right? So information is relatively easy to systematize and deliver, and therefore modern life focuses on information to the exclusion of everything else. And that brought to mind a quote by Reinhold Niebuhr. It cannot be denied that a bourgeois society is in the process of experiencing the law of diminishing returns in relation of technology and efficiency to the cultural life. The pursuit of culture requires certain margins of physical security and comfort, but the extension of the margins does not guarantee the further development of cultural values. It may lead to a preoccupation with the margins, an obsession with the creature comforts. So my first part, I'm focusing on the first part, that we have diminishing returns in what technology and efficiency are doing for us. It really is, we're leaning on them for things that they can't possibly deliver. Okay. So when we have information, but we don't have formation, it's basically dead. All right? So it's like if you read a book and then immediately forget it. Doesn't do you much good. Or if you read an article and like, that's an interesting article. And a month later, you're like, that didn't really change anything. It was interesting, right? It's inert. It's dead. It doesn't do anything. HR training, right? That is a complete waste of everyone's time. So if you have information, but you don't have formation, it doesn't do anything. And so the internet has addicted us to information without formation, and most people don't even know the difference. Okay? So I'm going to walk through just a couple of scenarios that are how you would actually go about the process of solving problems using formation. Okay? So one of which, we can think about specifically, so fixing disrespect, we can even specifically say sexual harassment, anything like that. If you've got a respect problem in the workplace, all right? So many workplaces face issues where employees are disrespectful to each other in some way. So, informational fix. Do an HR training video, all right? What interactions are respectful? What interactions are disrespectful, right? And that does nobody any good. There might be some margin of people who really didn't know, right? I've met some people who legitimately did not know what was respectful and not. That's helpful to them, but that's not usually, if you've got a problem in the workplace, that's not usually what the problem is. So it's only helpful if people really don't know what the difference is, right? So there's a transformational fix, which is kind of a start, and that's to show the people the damage of what disrespect can do to a workplace, right? So you can give people a new perspective on what this does. So you're not just giving them information about what not to do and what not to do. You're giving them, okay, you're being disrespectful. Let's think about this through their eyes. What is this doing to them? And you can think about what the impact is. And so this is useful if people really don't understand the consequences of their actions. And that probably happens more often than just the straight informational problem. But the formational fix is to establish easy, enforceable habits of respect. Okay? So you could institute a rule in your office that says you should always knock on a door before entering. Right? That's easy. It's easy to enforce. It's easy to do. And it's something that you're going to do every day. Right? Every day you're going to walk into someone's office. So every day we have established a habit of practicing respect. And it's something that anyone can call anyone out on and say, oh, you forgot to knock on the door. Right? So it's enforceable, it's straightforward, and it enforces the attitude you're looking for. You're giving people continual practice in respect and how to give it. Okay, so that is what a formational fix looks like. Giving people practice in what it is that they're missing. So the one issue with formational fixes is that they take longer to work. Formational fix does not work overnight. So if you have like a severe problem, you have to take care of the severe problem directly. But this is how you can manage the longer term outcomes. All right. So fixing interpersonal conflict. So a lot of people have bad attitudes toward each other. So again, we've got the informational fix, HR training about why bad attitudes don't help. The transformational fix is to tell stories about people whose attitudes have used their attitudes to overcome adversity. So maybe they just didn't realize that your attitude actually does something. If I've got a bad attitude that can harm us, if I have a good attitude that can help us. Some people don't know that. So a transformational fix, you can tell someone a story about how the company was having a bad attitude and they changed it and everything magically worked after that, right? The formational fix is to institute a weekly team get-together where everyone shares positive things about the past week and about each other. So you're giving people practice in holding the right attitude. So you give them a regular, repeatable practice of what to do to form them in the right way. So now you're developing a habit of sharing positive things, of being positive, about sharing positive things about each other. They're seeing other people do it. They're having to do it themselves. And so this comes out that this will make this a more habitual reaction for them to actually to do in the future. It gives people practice in thinking about the good rather than the bad, right? So a lot of times people focus on the negative. I focus on the negative a lot. I always think about what's wrong with something. But this gives people practice thinking about what's right. So you can use this in your household. So short term, you might ask yourself, what problems am I facing in my house today? And long term, who do I want to train my children to be? What type of person do I want them to be? All right, so take those two things and ask yourself, what simple daily practices will make good habits in this direction? We're not trying to solve the problem tomorrow. We're trying to establish a good habit that will lead them in the right direction. So, for example, if someone's messy, one habit you could establish is you need to pick one thing up off the floor every time you leave your room. Right? That's easy. One thing. It's enforceable. You can say you didn't pick up your one thing. It's different than clean. If you tell someone to clean your room, we can argue about whether or not your room's clean. Right? That can and has been arguments. Right? But there's probably something that they can pick up off their floor. Right? And so you say every time you leave your room, pick up one thing off the floor. Right? That's a habit. And so, you can say every time, just ask yourself, what is something that you can do simply, reliably, and repeatably? And then another thing is, what simple daily questions will help us make better choices? Right? What are the things that you should be asking yourself? Right? So the kind of the ones that we do in our families, we say, what is the next right thing? Okay, that's the question that we've kind of trained ourselves to ask. What is the next right thing? The nice thing about a simple question like that is that kind of boils through a lot of different things, because you're like, oh, there's so many things going on. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. And you just ask yourself, I don't need to solve the whole world. I just need to know what's the next right thing. The Christianese version is, what would Jesus do, right? So these simple things help us make better choices in the moment. And so if you practice asking yourself the question, then you're more likely to get the answer. And then you say, what stories can we surround ourselves that orient in the story we're trying to live out? Okay? So, because we need to immerse ourselves in stories that reflect what we're trying to live out, because that will help us. It helps us regurgitate that story because that's how we're thinking. So the transcendental virtues are truth, goodness, and beauty. This is reflected in Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. All right? And so what this is this is a request that we institute a formational habit focused around training our minds to think about the good, right? Because if we think about the good, we're creatures of imitation. We do the things that we see. And so if we focus our mind and our hearts on good things, we will become better people. That's literally what the Bible's asking us to do. So think on these things, right? Now, at Homeschool Oklahoma, we actually are trying to help you out with this. So this is our beauty page. We have in fact, specifically my wife has put together a bunch of resources for training your mind on beauty. And so we're trying to help families focus their attention on the true, the good, and the beautiful. So we have this series we call Simple Beauty. It's also on our newsletter. So if you get our newsletter, that'll be in your inbox automatically. And basically, every month we have a piece of art, something beautiful to look at, a piece of poetry, a beautiful use of the written word, music, something beautiful to listen to, hymns, a way to praise God beautifully, and nature, a way to see the beauty that God himself made. And we put these, every month we have them scheduled out so you can go over them with your family and just practice singing the hymn, just focusing, taking some time out of your day to practice focusing on beauty, making that a focus of your family. So, some things I want you to think about. I want you to think about what stories do we want our kids thinking about and living into. And I want you to think about what daily practices do we want forming our kids' hearts and habits. And what mantras or easy formulas can we use to help our children measure their actions against what God wants? So we talked about do the next right thing. What would Jesus do? Another good one that my pastor came up with is love goes first. Basically saying when you have conflict, especially conflict with unbelievers, people don't trust us, what love does is love takes the initiative. And love goes first, even in the face of adversity. And so these sorts of things can they're simple, they're straightforward, and they focus your attention on what is right. So then there's also lots of what are so-called spiritual disciplines. There's a classic book on this called Celebration of Discipline. And there's a more modern version called Practicing the Way. I recommend them both. And so these spiritual disciplines, they actually serve multiple purposes. That's one thing that I like about a lot of spiritual things. They don't just do one thing. They don't just operate in one dimension. They operate in multiple. So when we study the Bible, we not only learn theological truths, it also tells us the largest story that we're living into. right? It's a large and true story that we want to align ourselves with, all right? So I believe in a God that answers prayer, but I also think that the practice of prayer orients our hearts and minds so that we're thinking about God and what God wants and what God's doing and how we're participating in that. Okay, so prayer does its thing. It communicates with God. God does things, but it changes us. So fasting, the Bible talks about fasting, and you can apparently biblically it says some demons only come out by prayer and fasting. I've not personally tried that, but that is the recommendation of Scripture. But the other thing about fasting is practice for rejecting your desires. Not everything you want is good. And so when you practice fasting, you practice really, really wanting something and not giving it to yourself. All right? Confession. Confession is very important because it says, confess your sins to one another and you will be healed. So confession actually does something, but it also is a formational practice. What does confession do? Confession is a practice of recognizing our own contributions to our own problems. All right? And that's something that we have trouble seeing. So, how does this work in a group dynamic? So, as a tool of leadership, you can't be everywhere and you can't be everyone. So there's an interesting story that I often tell for when I used to teach our seniors. The book is called, let's see if I can think of it. It's about Navy SEALs leading and winning. Extreme Ownership. That's the name of the book. Fantastic book. And one of the things he talks about a mission where he was the leader, and some of his guys started attacking his own guys because they were in the wrong building. And it was thankfully, sadly, one of the Iraqi guys that were on our side got killed, but none of the servicemen got hurt. But it was a terrible event. You never want to have that happen to you in war, and so ultimately the guy in charge is supposed to tell people what went wrong, and he's like, "There's one person who's responsible for this, and it's me." And his point was not that he himself did something particular wrong, and it's not just a general take responsibility because I'm on top. It's that every time somebody makes a mistake, it's usually from something. It's because they didn't know something, they didn't practice something. This is, again, kind of the basis of this talk, is that you'll have fewer problems if you form yourself to be the right people. And so the goal then is to institute systems and processes which form people to be the type of people that you need to be in the places that you put them. Right? You can't be everywhere. You can't be everyone. But what you can do is align people. You can align people with your mission. So we can share stories to align people's hearts. There's lots of interesting stories about homeschooling. There's lots of interesting stories about teams and groups. And just sharing these stories with people will help people think about who they are, and when they make decisions, what stories they want to live in. And talk about co-op groups, talk about stories of teachers, stories of what education can do. You can also create practices to build people in the right direction. You can ask yourself, what do we need to be doing? Again, think about the HR issues that we talked about. What are some practices that we can do? Think about the problems that you have. What practices can we do to build people just a little bit closer to who we need them to be? And then develop habits of thought and action to make doing the right thing easier for everyone. how can we talk about, how can we make this process of figuring out what to do easier and more straightforward? So what you need to be thinking about, if you think about your current homeschool group, you say, think about your problems and you say, what is their underlying cause? And then you ask yourself, how can we as people change to fix the problem? Like obviously, as I mentioned, there's kind of the immediate problem, but then there's the long-term problem. Deal with the immediate problem however you need to deal with the immediate problem. But for the long-term problem, ask yourself, how does the community need to change so that the community doesn't have this problem? And then you ask yourself, what practices can we engage in to get the community to fix our character to resolve the problem? And then you say, what stories can we tell that help us orient ourselves in this situation? And then what problematic stories might we be listening to which make the problem worse? So anyway, I'd like to hear from you all. Any thoughts, questions, ideas? Yes.
This reminds me of a very wise book that we read one time it was the Berenstain Bears book. It was like, I can't remember what the title of it was, but it was a mama bear saying that the two older kids were fighting, and so she gave them some solutions, and the two kids were like, well, we're going to show her, we're going to say stuff that's like even more drippy with gooiness, so like, thank you, brother dear, you're so welcome and everything. Well, and then it eventually works in their house because they were practicing that. Well, my kids thought it was so funny that the two older ones thought they would try it, and it totally worked. Because they were practicing saying the nice things to one another when they had been bickering so much. And when you practice saying the nice things, then you just keep saying the nice things, and it's only when you say something mean and the other person takes offense and then you start in again. But just practicing that habit of kindness and it helps form the heart into something that you're seeing how you're being treated back is something that you want to treat someone else that way.
Exactly. So what was the name of that? You don't remember?
Forget your manners.
Berenstain Bears, Forget Your Manners. Yeah. So, and one that that my mom shared that I always thought was dumb. I thought this was terribly dumb, but actually, longer I've lived, the more I've recognized its value. So when she was in a sorority, if they wanted the salt, they would say, "Would you like the salt?" Right? And I never realized. I don't think she knew what the purpose was. I think I figured out that the purpose of that is that when you want something, you should use that as a trigger to think about if someone else needs it too. That way, you're using your needs and desires as a trigger to help someone else, not just yourself, right? And so, how many times do we take our needs and desires as, well, what can we get to make sure that our needs and desires will be met, rather than say, oh gosh, I have this need and desire. I wonder if somebody else does too, that I can help them out, right? And so it changes kind of your response to that, and just a very simple action of, because it's kind of a rhythm. You think of something you need, and then you say, does anyone else need this? So this is one thing. Like I've always had trouble with manners, just in general, and part of the problem is that I never knew what they were for. I was like, okay, we've got these weird rules, and the rules don't mean anything, and for someone like me, that just hits the wrong way, and so I it's taken me a lifetime to kind of recognize, oh, here's what these are for. These are tools that help us practice treating each other the right way, and it's not that manners can't change. We can adopt other practices, But if we don't have any practices that help us treat each other the right way, well, that leads to problems. And that's what really leads to groups and families and societies breaking down. In fact, one thing I think, there's a lot of old wisdom that no one knows what it's for. And I think that's a problem with the church. If you think about a lot of the things that have happened over the last 20 years, a lot of the cultural battles that we've lost them not because we were wrong, but because we collectively forgot why we were doing it, why it was important. And so we couldn't explain it to anyone else. We're like, oh, it's wrong because it's wrong. It's like, that's kind of true, but that doesn't help anyone. If you've got people who are disagree with you, and you just say, well, it's wrong because it's wrong, and they're like, well, that's your opinion. Moving on, and it's until you can articulate why it is that things are the way they are, it doesn't help people. And so I've kind of that's one of the things I've been trying to do over my life is figure out, why are these things here? What are they doing? How are they girding up our life as a community? And I'm just trying to help explain that to other people as I find out more.
Oftentimes we let our moods influence what we're going to do.
Yep.
We recognize there's a need, and so we're like, I'll do that when I feel motivated to, or when I feel better about the situation. But the new information that's come out is that we need to do in order to get our mood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like when you work out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of us don't want to be like, we're all at like 5 o'clock in the morning, hey, let's go and get work.
Right.
No, you go work out so that you feel better. And so you have to just shift your formation loop.
Yeah.
Your attitude comes after you're doing it.
Right. Yeah. What you do shapes who you are. So yeah, the other thing is when you do this, make sure that the practices are simple. One of the things that if you make the practice too hard, if you make the habit too complicated, then it becomes an opportunity for failure rather than success. And I remember sometime recently I was listening to a podcast, and they're talking about how they were trying to get their kid to lean into cleaning up more, and got to the point where if the kid merely tossed a sock in the direction of the hamper, it'd be like she'd get super excited for them doing the right thing. Just like make the success easy to attain. Right, and because what we're doing is we're trying to build this loop, and we're trying to build the loop in the right way. So it's more important that you're directionally right than that you are perfectly right. Directionally right will get you there eventually, because that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for formation is aimed at long-term change. It's not aimed at tomorrow change. It won't change tomorrow probably. Might make tomorrow worse, but in the long term, the right time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. We didn't do it then, so the second best time is right now.